Thank you for joining us here today and welcome. Hayakum Allah. I'm Noura Dabal, Executive Director of Arts and Creative Industries at the Royal Commission for AlUla. We're here today from the canyon that's hosting the second exhibition of Desert X AlUla, a site-responsive exhibition with international arts that take place in AlUla. For those of you who don't know AlUla is an extraordinary ancient desert and oasis, the northwest of Saudi Arabia, and a place of extraordinary nature and human heritage. A vast area covering around 22,000 square kilometers. It includes lush oasis valleys, towering sandstone mountains, and ancient cultural heritage. Uniquely born of place, AlUla engages visitors in art journeys through experiences of landscape. This interaction between art, nature, and heritage in the desert over millennia is a well of inspiration that roots our cultural offering. Today, AlUla is a living museum that once again will be a meeting point for those who understand that future depends on our mutual understanding of one another. Organized collaboratively between Desert X and RCU, Desert X AlUla is a recurring exhibition and a first of its kind in Saudi Arabia. Following its inaugural exhibition in 2020, the show returns between February 11th and March 30th, placing newly commissioned works from Saudi artists as well as international artists in dialogue with the nature and the culture of AlUla. Under the theme of Sarab, the exhibition this year explores the ideas of oasis and mirage, both important to the desert's history and culture. The exhibition highlights our inaugural AlUla Arts Festival, and I hope you get a chance to see and read more about the other programs that are happening beyond Desert X, especially what lies within, works from the collection of Basma Suleiman. The collection takes place concurrently at Maraya in AlUla. Thank you, Hayakum Allah.
Thank you, Noura, and welcome to Desert X 2022 in AlUla. Before talking a little bit about the show, I'd just like to introduce those of you who don't know to the origins of Desert X and why it's so important to us. Desert X started in California in 2017, and here in AlUla we're now on our second show, and it's fundamentally about the importance of art as conversation and how artists can lead these conversations, become our thought leaders, and spread them across the globe. One of the things that's very important to us about Desert X is that it takes art outside of the institutional boundaries, so it brings art to the landscape. And really, in many ways, it's the landscape that is shaping the art and shaping our experience. So art in this context is a journey. It's a journey that's both literal and metaphorical. It takes us to a place, through a landscape, and to ideas. And the role of artists as thought leaders in this journey, as our guides, is really important. And art becomes the beacon.
It's very important to have Desert X here in AlUla, in Saudi Arabia, because we also have a very important vantage point of artists from the region, and specifically also from Saudi, that have great experience and can also add a narrative and a layer of critical thought, but also of spectacular artworks that we can showcase. We want to propel these artists, and this is a great place to do that.
It's an outdoor exhibition, it's free and it's open to the public. It's really a site-responsive show where artists are invited to come to immerse themselves in it and make works that really respond to it. And in many ways, the landscape is the curator in a show like this. Originating ideas behind Desert X were really to create art that can speak to desert communities. It originated in the desert. Right from the beginning, there was an idea of art as conversation, art as dialogue between people. So when we were approached to do a Desert X in AlUla here, it made absolute sense as an expansion of that idea. It began in California and now, thankfully has spread to the Middle East.
What kind of story does every artist want to tell? Some take historical approaches, some look into biological approaches, some take on literature as the inspiration, and all being derived from the landscape around them, whether it's the stories that are embedded in these mountains, whether it's the cultures that have passed through this region, especially being a melting pot of all these different cultures. There isn't a beginning and an end to the story.
with institutional spaces, you have a number of barriers. You have a financial barrier often, you have a knowledge barrier because you're going into this white box with no context. But here, everyone has a relationship to the landscape, so already you're sort of engaged. And what's been one of the wonderful things about Desert X is a lot of the audience are not familiar with art, and they've understood it through landscape. And so it has the capacity to engage new audiences and new communities and new conversations.
Since the start of this nation, but even earlier, of artists who have been working in silence, unrecognized for a very long time. This recent shift in the dynamic of the country and at the same time of the world coming to recognize that there's so much talent, both in Saudi Arabia but also in the entire Arab world and the extended region. This kind of recognition for artists of the region and of Saudi Arabia is coming to the fore. And at the same time, it's a moment where they are getting their deserved recognition. The theme, Sarab, which means mirage, was one of the anchor points, but we also thought about the oases as another anchor. And the points of the mirage and the oases is the relationship of man to nature and this kind of drive of man to control nature, but at the same time, nature being elusive and somehow, dissipating and finding its control back. And we feel that they are really successful and able to translate this dynamic in a very beautiful and aesthetic way.
And with the artists, it's like giving them the whole space to work with. No boundaries whatsoever around you in the sense of what can be done and achieved. And it is all about responding to the desert.
Desert X is really a place for the local community to be engaged with artworks that are present for them in a very public sphere. Open, accessible, and it's a place for people to really contemplate and kind of get in tune with that art and nature. So it is definitely rooted for the local people, but at the same time it's a gateway for people from the outside to come visit AlUla and find something spectacular.
You indulge in it and see where your feet take you in the desert. It's that kind of an exhibition.
What's interesting and been fascinating for me being in AlUla is seeing the number of specialists that have been brought here to preserve the cultural legacy. Here you find, leaders in the fields of all human science, from archaeology, history, hydrology, everything you can imagine. But what's equally important is that there are non-specialists here. And these non-specialists are the artists who've made up this show. And there are 15 of them. And they bring to the conversation an intersectional understanding, a way of thinking about the world that crosses all of these disciplines that we already have here, that merges them with the landscape, with the ideas, and with the communities that have also been participating in the creation of these works. Well, it's really the landscape that is the inspiration for all of the works in the show. There are themes that run through it, and these are themes that have been explored both by the curatorial team, which includes myself and of course Reem Fada and Raneem Fazi, and by the artists themselves. And the themes include this idea of Sarab or mirage, the idea of how perception and one's understanding of space and even time is altered here, how doubling, reflection and camouflage play a role, as does myth. Many of the artists have riffed on these themes, and we also find other currents running through the show, all of which really come from the place, describe the place, and hopefully give us indications about how we can reread the past and relearn the future. And so all of these works in some ways are about learning from the past and imagining new futures. Thank you.